We are back with more college football coverage, and I'm going to just put it like this. Upsets in some of these ranked matches that I'll be talking about later on might legitimately derail a couple of these team seasons. Legitimately. No question about it. Again, upsets are going to happen on a week-to-week basis, and that is the true madness of college football. That is embraced. But when you get on the losing side of those things, man, they can legitimately be momentum killers. Before we get into those, though, there are a few lighter matches here. So to get straight into it, on Friday, Houston would take on Colorado. And Deion Sanders, leading up to this game, was contemplating benching Caden Salter, which he would eventually do. And he kept on speaking high praise of Ryan Staub, their backup. He became the third stringer this season after they also acquired Julian Lewis as a recruit. And he hadn't had a lot of experience starting before. But he kept on saying, in Staub we trust, in something along the lines of, I had a dream that Staub would start or something like that. He kept saying that the entire time leading up to this game. There were only a few signs of promise, but everything else was just very questionable, to say the least. I mean, at least on this first drive right here, he would make some solid reads. You know, a nice 10-yard dump off to Williams, a good catch from Miller for 16 yards. But his issue is that he's not a quarterback that can stretch the ball down the field. In fact, in terms of games that he's appeared in, he hadn't, I believe, completed a single pass over more than 10 yards down the field. And that struggle will continue in this game because, as I'll get into later, it took him pretty much up until the fourth quarter to get his first completion on multiple tries, simply trying to push the ball down the field. The fact that they struggled with that might not all be on Ryan Staub, though. And this is the other point that I would have to add here before getting into what Houston started to do. Because let's put it like this. Yeah, Salter, as a fifth-year guy, you'd expect him to do a little more. But I'm not going to lie to you. A quarterback change did not solve the problem for them. What the fuck were some of the play calls that Pat Shurmur, their offensive coordinator, was calling out there? What the hell is he still doing as an offensive coordinator for this team? Now, again, we know he was a shithead coach in the NFL. We get that. And on the college level, at least, maybe a few of his, schemes could work. But clearly, they're leaving Colorado in situations where there is a clear lapse between the teams that they are going up against and whatever type of system that he's trying to implement in this offense. So you got to pack that shit up. As for Houston, obviously they have Connor Weigman transferring from Texas A&M this season. But they also had a running back in Dean Connors, who is a Rice transfer as well, as they mentioned in the broadcast. Tell me why they were just able to run rampant over this Colorado defense through the entire game. It happened in spurts on this drive here, but Weigman, surprisingly, would also make a few solid passes, with Thomas being able to just slide all the way down for a catch hauled in from Weigman on this play. And I don't know, he just gets out of the pocket, and it looks like it's going to be a much deeper pass than it actually ended up being. But I guess it had the right amount of touch on it, and Thomas just felt the need to slow down. Because honestly, if he would have been running at full speed, there's probably a chance that that's incomplete. At least Colorado in this situation would hold Houston to a field goal, but from then on, it just wouldn't get much better for that defense. Staub would continue to suffer 3-and-outs trying to lead this Colorado offense, but it took no time for Houston to get it back immediately. And as soon as this shit happened, I was so confused. Because obviously, two of the major problems and two of the biggest reasons why Colorado's defense was underwhelming last season was because of horrible run defense and missed tackles. So when I see that Connor Weigman, who is legitimately a fucking pocket passer, scamper for 49 yards down the fucking field and break tackle after tackle after tackle, we instantly had a problem. As soon as that shit happened, everything changed. And from there, Colorado just couldn't handle it. I mean, it didn't help that they had a roughing the passer on a crucial third down, although their speedster in Thomas ended up making the catch anyways. So it didn't even really matter all that much. Pushing them further into territory, Dean Connors was able to just run in untouched for a 4-yard touchdown. Little resistance in that front seven. And again, I get that a lot of those trench guys are a bit younger, some freshmen, some sophomores. But you should not be getting moved around and bullied like this. Matter of fact, by this point in the game, I think at least one of their core linemen, Houston that is, one of their core linemen went down and out with an injury. And it wouldn't be the first one that they'd suffer either. So you're going up against a semi-depleted unit, and you're still struggling to impose your will in the trenches. That's fucking crazy. All Houston had to do, and you got to credit their defense for recognizing this. We're talking about a player in Staub who had been making his third career start, I believe. Doesn't have a lot of experience doing this. So naturally, they would start to send pressure. And once Colorado got behind schedule, including on this drive, it was too much to overcome for them, so they would go on another 3-and-out. Now, things would slow down just a little bit for Houston. I mean, Colorado's defense, again, kept giving up huge plays. Johnson was able to run down the field for a 28-yard catch, and then one of their backup running backs in Snead was also just able to make multiple defenders bounce off of him with relative ease. You're spending all this time in film, in practice, being taught these things about form tackling and stuff, and he's just making y'all look like little boys out there, man. That's insane work. But they did get a good 3rd-and-8 stop, sacking Weigman in the backfield, and they would force them into a field goal that gave them a 13-0 lead. Multiple 3-and-outs would ensue for both teams from there, and then Colorado, in a pretty interesting turn, would draw first contact when it comes to their scoring on the night. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Staub, this might have been one of his better drops. He actually managed to make a few good plays here. Like on this 3rd and long play, he had to pull out a little bit of improv because everything was locked up on the back end. He kind of takes it all the way near the sideline and somehow, some way picks up 11 yards to give them a first down and extend the drive. They would start trying to get the run game going around him, but he would also manage to take advantage of the pass when he needed to, as Marion Miller would haul in an 8-yard grab from him. It was a tight window throw. You gotta throw them with enough velocity, or else it's just going to make the job of a cornerback in that situation far easier. He had the right amount of speed on the ball, and it ended up being complete. From there, their backup running back in Price would run for a 38-yard touchdown to give them a 16-7 lead now. After the Cougars would go and get another field goal for themselves after a few big plays of their own. But again, Colorado defense at this point wasn't really breaking too much. And then Staub, even though that earlier drive might have been his finest one, he might have had his best two plays even, you could argue, of the night. Yeah, you have Micah Welch check down that went for 25 yards in this drive. But before that, you had him uncork an absolute dot over to Marion Miller for 36 yards. And it was like, okay, had to step back for a second. You know, they dialed up a pretty good play call, and he made a pretty impressive throw, to say the least. Then we get into Houston's red zone, and somehow, some way, he's weaving his way through the defense, taking all of the contact with the people that are trying to absolutely light him up. And he manages to get through for a touchdown. Somehow. All of a sudden, we have a ball game, and it would be a 16-14 score at the end of the half. Third quarter of absolute hell for this Colorado team. Because you want to know what proceeded to happen next? They literally let them run all over them in this third quarter alone. All over them. Their pass play to rush play distribution in this third quarter was absolutely insane. And they dominated time of possession in this as well. They would manage to get a field goal to start it out, but a small 3-and-out for Colorado would give them the ball right back. And they proceeded to just ram it down their fucking throats. Simply put. I mean, yes, he would hit up their speedster again in Johnston for an 18-yard gain, but just demoralizing carry after demoralizing carry would absolutely fuck them up. And even then, they would get themselves in a situation where Dean Connors got a sort of run, nearly got in the end zone for a touchdown, and it was overturned. They marked them just short. You only delayed the inevitable at that point because Connor Weigman would get in for a sort of touchdown of his own for some reason. Yet again, and he is not a fucking dual threat quarterback. So how in the fuck are you letting this happen? They would get the ball back for just a little bit of time remaining in the third quarter. And then Colorado opened up the fourth quarter with Ryan Staub making a pretty bad mistake. Throwing an interception right to the defense to give them the ball back. And all of a sudden, if you are Houston in this situation, all you needed was a touchdown. And you might have been able to just win the game flat out right there. Luckily for Colorado, there was still a chance because they would actually manage to get a stop, and Sanchez missed the field goal. As I was consistently saying watching this game live, if there was ever a time that Colorado needed to make something happen, it was going to be on this drive right here. And I kid you not, Ryan Staub missed every single throw on this drive that ended up being a 3-and-out. I think, in fact, the last two passes were both passes more than 10 air yards down the field. And he flat out missed them. Now, again, you have to attribute that to the pressure that Houston was sending consistently throughout the night. Because you're not going to make it easy on this kid. But at the same time, when you have room to make the throw and you're still missing, that's not a good picture. And just like that, it wouldn't take Houston any time to game it, honestly. I mean, Johnson had himself a night getting a 54-yard game here. And then Connor Weigman would manage to fucking shake multiple defenders out of their shoes en route to a 7-yard rushing touchdown. In fact, by this point as well, you want to know just how bad the Colorado defense was in this game. Coming into this game, Houston had the longest streak of consecutive games without reaching 400 yards of offense in the nation. It was at 22 games. They broke it with time to spare in this fourth quarter. That tells you everything you need to know. And for a while, Colorado had absolutely no response whatsoever. Turnover on downs on this possession, but at least, although it was a little too late, very ill-fated, they did manage to force Houston into the same thing before getting a touchdown of their own, with Staub completing his first pass of 10 or more air yards down the field to Williams from 37 yards out for a touchdown. Ultimately, in a sort of ball control manner here, the Cougars really just had to run the ball at this point. They would get the field goal, and to add even more salt to the wound, Ryan Staub would throw yet another pick for Houston to cap off the game with a 36-20 win. Before I even get into the numbers, I just have to put it like this. It could be attributed as a great win for Houston, but I honestly don't know how consistent that this will be. Still, in terms of bowl eligibility, they've given themselves a tremendous amount of room, even if, Big 12 competition is going to be much harder. To start out 3-0 definitely gives you a leg up, but you've got to show this in conference play, because they've certainly, over the past few seasons, struggled to make positive strides in that regard. It's been a long time since they've been a threat. So, if they can reassert that, that would be good for them. As for Colorado, they are also a team that desperately needs to win conference games in order to become a more respected ball club. Yes, Deion Sanders took an ascent last season in terms of having a better record, but in the big games, he still managed to lose those and put up underwhelming performances. This is a scary sight if you are a Colorado fan. It's a scary one. Like, the score here doesn't tell the full story. Houston, even if they are 3-0, they're probably one of the weaker teams in the Big 12. And they dominated the shit out of you in this game. In all three phases of the fucking game. They completely wiped the floor with you. If you're having this kind of struggle and this kind of overall problem against them, wait until you get into Big 12 conference play against stronger opponents. What the hell are you going to do then? Just something you have to think about in this situation. That's for the numbers. Again, rough night for Staub. 54.3% completion from the field, 204 passing yards, and a touchdown pass with 2 interceptions. Apparently, they don't credit him with this rushing touchdown because they say he fumbled. I wouldn't be all too sure about that one. As for the Cougars here, they let this man Weigman have 305 total yards in 2 rushing touchdowns, while Dean Connors had 111 total yards and a touchdown run. You know it's bad when Weigman, of all quarterbacks, literally outgain their entire offense. Because as a squad, when looking at team numbers, Buffalo's only had 300 total yards. That's got to be some kind of embarrassing. As for Johnson here, a guy who they label as, again, potentially good, he had 5 receptions for 117 yards. Now, again, he could honestly be a really good wide receiver. But the reality is, for good reason, Houston football is not being broadcasted like that. Again, same thing. I guess we'll have to see it in conference play. If you're going to do it against weaker competition, fine. But when those big moments and big games come, if he is truly that great, they'll probably be looking his way more often than not. All right, on to another game that honestly could have been seen as intriguing, but ended up just being in that ballpark for all the wrong reasons in K-State versus Arizona, also on Friday. This one was just a weird watch. That's really all I can say about this one. Because it wouldn't start out very well. I mean, the Wildcats, Arizona, Battle of the Wildcats. Who's the superior Wildcat squad? They would actually have a pretty good start to their drive. As Fafita and Mahdi, keep those guys in mind when it comes to the rushing game, by the way. Oh my goodness. As a duo, they torched that Kansas State run defense. But penalties have been a problem for Arizona all season to this point. They are one of the worst teams in terms of average penalties per game and penalty yardage. Yet they're still undefeated coming into this ball game. But it would hurt them a little bit on this drive right here, because even though Fafita would manage to get 3 yards back on a pass, Salgado Medina would miss this 47-yard kick to start out the game. Oh, but don't worry. Kansas State would pretty much stall out themselves. When it came to passing, both teams were just weird about it. I don't really know what to say. Avery Johnson, though, did not look the part. As elite of a quarterback as he can be, he is a scrambling quarterback at best, and this was not his night when it came to spreading the ball around. I mean, oh my goodness. It was atrocious. They nearly got bailed out, though, because on this 4th down, they punt the ball away, and yet Arizona's gunner muffed the catch, giving K-State the ball right back, and they still didn't have it in them to get a touchdown out of this. How do you get field position near Arizona's red zone and you lose yardage on this drive? That's exactly what happened to K-State's offense. I mean, you do have to credit Arizona's defense for managing to overcome that situation and hold them to a field goal, which they would make, to give themselves a lead, at least. But that's kind of wild. And that muffed kick, keep that in mind. That will become somewhat karmic for K-State later on. Anyways, the rushing attack was on point, at least for the Arizona squad. Mahdi had himself a night, including this damn 60-yard run here to get Arizona deep in K-State territory. And while Arizona was looking to strike. A penalty would nearly kill their momentum again. Yet, somehow, someway, Fifita managed to overcome it. Anyways, getting in the end zone for a 15-yard rushing touchdown of his own to give Arizona a 7-3 lead. Now I got to talk about Chris Kleiman for a second. Because I know that in fourth down situations, he would want to trust Avery Johnson. And maybe on this situation, they don't know about the strength of their kicker's leg. They're feeling a little bit of pressure to try and respond quickly with a scoring drive of their own. I can get it from that standpoint. But tell me why on fourth down, they had one of the weirdest plays enveloped. Like, I see part of this play, and as soon as I get back in, you have Avery Johnson on the left side of the field just scrambling around, trying to make something happen while everything else on the back end is covered. And then he has no other choice but to just throw it out of bounds. It's like, what the fuck are you thinking about? How many times to start off the season, in fact, this K-State found themselves in these low leverage spots on fourth down, and they will still decide to go for it and miss it. Yet they're surprised why they have a losing record at this point. You know, if you're a team that thrives off of one-score games, and I mean, they were on the winning end of most of them last year, aggressiveness is definitely going to be a part of that. But you have got to be smart about it. You can't spam fourth down attempt after fourth down attempt every single time and think that everything will just go according to plan. It's not. Arizona countered that perfectly. They locked every single thing up, and you still felt that this was okay, instead of at least trying to take your points. Like, it's about the little things, and they just seem to be missing that detail right now. As for Arizona, this would be more of a passing drive for them, as Hunter III would haul in a nice catch, and then he would also get Wysong, one of their other wide receivers, active for a 27-yard gain over the middle of the field. While Monty would get a 10-yard rush, this ended up being on a third and very long. So, once again, Kansas State, despite that stupidity, was fortunate enough to hold them to just a field goal. But yet another 3-and-out follow for this K-State offense. It got to the point where they were just being outgained completely by Arizona's offense. And Avery Johnson at this point only had like damn near a 50% completion for something like 13 to 15 fucking yards. That's how bad it was for him to start this game out. And that is just not something that can be explained. You had to see it for yourself. They had that man in a blender most of the night. I really don't understand. Oh boy. You know? And again, once more, like, penalties were still being enforced on Arizona. At times, they were trying to get in their own way, and yet they were still able to overcome all of that shit because they would get in for another rushing touchdown with Fifita actually getting low, using his frame to bowl over the defense and get in the end zone. And that kind of quality is respectable. You aren't expecting that from someone as small as Fifita is. But I suppose that is the identity that Arizona is trying to build. they've got to be careful about it because obviously we know what happened last season with that team as a whole. But, hey, what are you going to do? K-State would once more have to settle for another punt. And then things got very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Because that muff punt by Arizona, well, let's just say the football gods would return the favor for them after they would initially be stopped for a 4th down. Because Lockett, one of the gunners for the K-State squad, would muff the punt and give Arizona the ball back with 50 seconds left and a chance to get a fucking touchdown or an additional score. They bungled it completely, though. It got to the point where they tried to get Salgado Medina to attempt a 62-yarder, and it was nowhere close to being good. But still, Arizona had the lead. You think you're in smooth sailing at this point, and honestly, you couldn't blame them for thinking that. They had literally dominated them in every metric. And yet, Kansas State would immediately storm back. If Kansas State didn't have Jace Brown return for them this season, there is a chance that things could be much worse for them. Like, he single-handedly got them back into this ballgame. I mean, you have him getting a fucking 75-yard rushing touchdown on the first play from scrimmage. From scrimmage in the second half. To get the lead back down to 7. They managed to get a stop on Arizona and actually a blocked kick. And while it was very rough for a second for them to even move the ball into the end zone, Avery Johnson would eventually get down for a touchdown after completing another crucial 3rd and long conversion to who else other than Jace Brown. Single-handedly. And it was looking very great for Kansas State, although again, Mahdi was still a killer for them on the ground. I think prior to one of these runs, he by himself had 127 rushing yards. And yet still, after a 34-yard gain, they were able to force an interception. It's pretty funny when you think about it because Moss, a cornerback named Moss, would get this interception. And at this point, Kansas State had multiple cornerbacks not even wearing any gloves, just trying to go with an old school method. And I suppose it was working out for them if you're going to make a play like that. Like, I can't say anything about that. Plus, this is a K-State defense that has led the nation in forced turnovers since 2022. So you would suppose that they were due for one, and it couldn't have come at a better time. All Kansas State needed to do was capitalize on the momentum. They failed to do that and went on a 3-and-out instantly. Now, the Arizona squad would methodically move the ball down the field, just chipping away at the clock, running it and running it and running it, because they legitimately could not stop them all night long. And they would even pick up a 4th down conversion here to keep things going for a little longer, with Salgado Medina being able to get in a 31-yard field goal, because that's way easier than a fucking 62-yarder. Of course it is. Kansas State still had a chance to respond, and again, Jace Brown would answer the call. But when you are in a spot like that, and you're making it so obvious that Brown is your target that you're locked in on, the defense was going to start to account for it. And they would on this 4th down attempt. Yet again, right? Like, I can kind of understand them going for this one. It's a little more manageable. You're trying to snatch this momentum away from Arizona. But the fact that you don't get this one hurts. And still, you were in the fight. But both teams, to open up the fourth quarter, would go 3-and-out before Arizona would just start bleeding the clock. And I mean bleeding the clock. Burning 7 minutes and 30 seconds off of this shit as Monty just continued to truck through this defense and get even more rushing yards on this night. But he would also get active out of the backfield, getting a 27-yard catch. And it was crazy how this happened, too. Like, on a 3rd and 15, you're really just trying to keep everything out in front of you. But tell me why this man, Monty, gets the ball within just a few yards from where Fafita's at. And every single defender trying to tackle him takes such a bad angle of pursuit. He speeds past every single one of them. And not only picks up the first down, but now puts the Kansas State defense in a tougher spot. Because they're just burning even more time with that play going through. But still, while it could have been dangerous, they managed to get another field goal forced to bring the score to 23-17. And this is where the Kansas State offense just completely sputtered, as if it wasn't already like this for most of the night. But again, you forced your way back into this game. You had a chance at winning, and you just completely sputtered. Like, what the fuck are they doing? Just to think about this. They get the ball back, okay, with a chance to go down on a money drive and take the lead. Why, then, do you call the most obvious run play a draw for Avery Johnson, and he loses 11 yards on that play alone? Now you're working that far behind schedule, trying to pick up first downs, and they don't get it done, giving the Arizona squad the ball back after turning it over on downs. And still they had another chance to win, because to add even more intrigue and just weirdness to this game, Salgado Medina would miss another fucking kick, giving K-State another shot with 2 minutes left in this damn game to drive down the field and score. Now, Chase Brown would get one first down from them on this drive. But Avery Johnson's inaccuracies just flared up again, and it ended up being fatal. Didn't help on the 3rd down, and on 4th down, Brown actually had the ball in his hands and just dropped it. Rare mistake for the man, but it ended up being a brutal one. And somehow, someway, the Arizona squad, although barely when you think about how this game progressed, proved that they were the better Wildcat team and would get themselves a 23-17 lead to improve to 3-0 on the season. Again, the passing numbers are not really going to blow you away on either side. Fafita completed just 48.5% of his passes and had 178 passing yards. But Johnson, again, might have been more atrocious. 88 yards on 44.8% completion. Absolute bullshit. That is just unacceptable for a player of his caliber. And then, for other numbers here, Brown had a combined 7 touches for 143 yards in that rushing touchdown, and it still wasn't enough. Every other rusher here for K-State had 23 carries and 30 yards. 23 carries and 30 yards from every other rusher, even Avery Johnson, that was not named Jace Brown. And that single effort by him, again, was still not enough to overcome that. Like, that is just the greatest display of it, in fact. As for Arizona's rushing, how about 237 total yards and 5.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns on the ground, with Mahdi accounting for 189 yards by himself. And it's kind of criminal he didn't get in the end zone here. They should have tried to make that happen. But again, sometimes that's how the game is played. There's nothing you can do about that. And I mean, Kansas State might be as good as done for this season. I'm not going to lie. Like, you could bear, okay, if you're in their situation. And I mean, I like obviously covered that game. You could bear to get a pass for losing against Iowa State. You could get a pass for that. But in these situations, when you lose ranked matches like that to start out the season, obviously your odds to contend are going to take a little bit of a hit, and you need to go near perfect for the rest of the season. It's hard to do, but some of the last few games they've had have been gimmies. And again, you want to, if you are a team trying to contend for a playoff spot, you want to show that you can win the close games. But the fact that you quite literally almost let North Dakota beat you, if not for a last-minute touchdown. The fact that you had a close match against fucking Army and lost last week. And now this game against an Arizona team who was quite literally one of the worst Big 12 teams last year. And you lose this. They gave you chance after chance to win with some of the mistakes that they made, and you still lost. I do not see a world in which K-State can come back from that. There is almost no shot for them to. And so now you've got to play out the rest of this season with that in mind. As unfortunate as that is. Because, again, there's literally no way. How the fuck can you explain that? How? Multiple missed kicks. Multiple failed fourth down conversions. Still having a shot to win the game and absolutely failing to do so. Insane work. That is terrible, man. Like, my goodness. As for Arizona, I mean, I don't really know what it would take for them to get back into the rankings. But again, you are off to doing exactly what you should be doing. The road will obviously get tougher. I mean, the fact that you have Iowa State as your next matchup is obviously going to hurt. We'll see what they do then. It would be too early to project for them because, again, honestly, like, I guess that they mentioned that this coach was one of the first to have back-to-back 2-0 starts in consecutive seasons in quite some time. As impressive as that is, we know how things derailed last season for this team as a whole. So you can't take that shit for granted. You have to be trying to consistently prove yourself on a week-to-week basis if you are Arizona here. It's as simple as that. You can't play around because the second that you do, oh, yeah, will not end up going well for them. All right, moving on to Clemson and Georgia Tech. And disclaimer, I did not watch the entirety of this game, but I did at least watch like the first few drives. Now, you knew that Georgia Tech was going to just stick to their guns. As much as I will say they are a triple option team, they're going to always be that way. That identity, at least under this coach, that's never going to change. And yet Clemson, recognizing this, still allowed them for a lot of this first drive to just gash them completely. Calculated gains in the passing aspect, demoralizing runs, and just a lot of motion, a lot of RPO action that, again, is still questionable because it's like, why? They got down near Clemson's end zone, in fact, but their goal line unit would hold up. I mean, on this fourth down, as I'm mentioning all these RPOs and shit, you would actually have them try to put Haynes out wide and throw him a just very uninspired screen. Clemson's defense played it perfectly, very well. And they managed to get the stop, even though Georgia Tech was trying to force a lot of pressure on them. Like, if you can have Georgia Tech do that to you and they get a lead on you, it could be potentially dangerous. So to hold them to nothing was a massive win for that Tigers defense. But yet, they were not willing to return the favor at all on offense. Because this team just continues to struggle with finding out what their identity is. Again, sure, Klubnik will have those games where he's on fire, but again, his inconsistencies have really proven themselves over the last 3 weeks for the people who still don't want to admit that he has a problem in that regard. And again, as I stated, when they lost to LSU, his case is not helped by the fact that they do not have a rushing game for shit. They don't. While this Randall person might be an okay running back, he is a receiver in a running back's body, and every single defense that has went up against Clemson has exposed that fact. Klubnik can be an okay runner, but he would make a fatal mistake right here. Obviously, being able to scramble out of the pocket and make plays could be a skill set for him. He did get 10 yards on this game, but Daniels, off this option, would absolutely blow him up in space. And he forced a great fumble on him, giving Georgia Tech the ball back immediately within just 5 plays. And as a result, it didn't really take much for Georgia Tech to get 3 points on the board. They weren't even worried about moving the ball all that much. They didn't have to. Burr was right in range, and he managed to give them a 3-0 lead. The Tigers would have to put in more work across 4 minutes as well. And at that point, I was getting ready to get out of there, so I would miss the rest of this action, at least live, even though I would check back in from time to time. And man, I let it just go on for a while because I had to keep focused with what it was that I was doing. But when I checked back in and I saw that Georgia Tech was keeping this thing close, I had to question what the fuck was going on. So to go through it, Jamal Haynes of the Haynes backfield managed to get in for a touchdown over the course of this time, and then Georgia Tech would take a 13-0 lead across a drive filled with multiple runs before Clemson would finally manage to get a response and just get on the fucking board, okay? Adam Randall would actually manage to get a 30-yard run somehow. And then Klubnik would get in for a rushing touchdown to take it into the half. Clemson had a very unique, I should say, unique start to the third quarter, to say the least. I mean, oh my goodness. Like, they would actually start driving down the field. You know, to do that on the first drive shows promise compared to how it went for him in the first half. But to have Daniels log another turnover on the day in the form of a interception could not have hurt any more in that moment. Truthfully. But they would force a great play on Haynes King, making him fumble and lose a shit ton of yardage to back Georgia Tech up completely. For as formidable as that offense can be, the way that they try to incorporate their triple option scheme and smash mouth football, they need to always be ahead of the line of scrimmage. And whenever they get behind it, they become a discombobulated offense in every sense of the imagination. That would be no different here. And within just 2 plays, I mean, the Tigers had a response because Bryant Wesco Jr., one of their returning wide receivers from last season, would actually manage to catch and run for 73 yards down the field for a touchdown to give the Tigers a 1-point lead. It was mostly slow for the rest of this third quarter as multiple 3-and-outs would be forced, and Georgia Tech would also be forced into a turnover on downs, despite trying their absolute hardest to pick up a single yard on 4th down. But they would be ready to respond in the fourth quarter after taking 6 minutes and 15 seconds off the clock, as they would not only get Haynes King multiple runs and get Jamal Haynes involved for a 27-yard gain, but King would manage to get in for a rushing touchdown and also successfully convert the 2-pointer. But Clemson, feeling a little bit of desperation at this point, because again, how the fuck, as I'm seeing this, how the fuck are you down to Georgia Tech? How? They would tie it back up. They would, with another touchdown by Randall, to have it at 21-all with 3 minutes left. But you know Georgia Tech in this situation. The fact that you even had to force Clemson into that situation is a great win for you. And with 3 minutes left, they were free to implement all aspects of what it is that they do consistently. You really think that if they were to have it their way in their home stadium, they would allow Clemson to so much as get another possession in this ball game with as much time on that clock as there was? You'd be lying to yourself if you would think that that would happen. That is where the ball control factor comes in. They would literally hold on to it for the remainder of the game, forcing Clemson to use all their timeouts and consistently applying that pressure on this team. With that going down, Georgia Tech, as the clock wound down, managed to get a 55-yard field goal in and for the win to give them a 24-21 upset victory against then 12th ranked Clemson. And this field goal also has a bit of historical significance, as I believe that it is the longest game-winning field goal in that organization's history. Burr's obviously been a staple kicker for them over the past few seasons, so I guess that was only fitting for him to get that in. Only right. However, Clemson is yet another team that will probably be done in terms of trying to contend for the playoffs. This is just not something that you can overcome. Before I get into that, though, you have to give respect to Georgia Tech. They actually now have a higher amount of odds to make the CFP than Clemson does right now. And I mean, they're on a heater to start out the season. This coach has got them going right, man. 3-0 before you enter full-on conference play. Like, there's something to be said about that. And again, you've built up a nice cushion for yourself, no matter how this goes. That is all you want to do if you're Georgia Tech in this case. It has been quite the long time since they've made that kind of noise. This team, there's just something about it. I really don't know. As a unit, it was the Haynes King show. When is it not, right? 314 total yards, 200 passing, over 100 rushing the ball. He got in for a touchdown run, as I mentioned. Jamal Haynes also had a touchdown run. When you can dominate the time of possession like that, and even though the yards per carry may not necessarily blow you away with just 3.5, the strategy that goes into it and the rate at which they elect to run the ball can demoralize a lot of teams in the nation. And that's exactly what happened to Clemson by the end of this game. As for Clemson, though, like, seriously, again, if you manage to just have the close loss against LSU, we could bear with that. But you combine that with not only managing to be losing at some point in the game to fucking Troy last week before coming back and winning, but now dropping this game too, I can imagine that by the time AP polls have come out, they are going to be ranked far, far lower. Nearly unranked, potentially, after a loss like this. And it will definitely hurt you in ACC standings, too. Because when you start thinking about tiebreakers en route to like conference championships and stuff like that, Georgia Tech, if it came down to it, will hold that over you. And then what? It's like, come on, man. I don't understand. The fact that they even had 174 yards on the ground in 5 yards per carry doesn't even seem real to me. It did not feel like Georgia Tech was really fazed by that at all. And Klubnik, yet again, 57.7% completion, a touchdown and an interception with 207 passing yards, 126 of those going to Wesco Jr., by the way. Just an underwhelming performance for the team. But what else is new with them at the same time? Like, the fact that this team was expected to do that much this season, and just like that, they might be well out of the race. Like, they are absolute frauds. Absolutely. It's just a horrible watch. Now, again, any number of things can happen over the rest of the season. But as far as I know now, like, realistically, there is little chance that they can make something out of this season following a result like that. It's hard, man. It is hard, bro. All right, moving on to Georgia and Tennessee, and same thing. Although I only missed a little bit of action in terms of game time, there was a lot that happened in that small window. Because not only would Joey Aguilar start off the game with a rushing touchdown, but Georgia would respond immediately with Gunnar Stockton getting in for a rushing touchdown. And then on the very next drive, in just a couple of plays, Brazel II would start off his day magnificently. And he would have one for the ages, by the way. But he would get a fucking 72-yard receiving touchdown to give the Vols a 14-7 lead here. And then, just as I was coming back to watch the rest of the college football action over the course of the day, the Bulldogs would be forced into a 3-and-out here. So, the Vols would get right back into it. And Aguilar, again, just looks to be much more polished as a passer, which, honestly, for Heupel's offense, might have been exactly what they needed. I mean, quite literally, you have him getting Matthews here for multiple catches, including those of 15 and 21 yards respectively. But there would be back-to-back penalties, with one on each team that would kind of stall out the drive for a little bit of a second. But within just a few plays after hitting up Kitzelman for the first time, Aguilar would link up with Brazel II yet again for his second touchdown of the game to give the Vols a 21-7 lead. Now, they would have to start out the second quarter down. Bulldogs, that would be. But this would end up being a fortuitous drive for them. I mean, obviously, Georgia's strength with Stockton and a lot of those other running backs in the backfield is going to be their rushing of the football. But they are not devoid of talent on the outside. You know, you have Dylan Bell coming back for yet another season. You have Zachariah Branch. Getting him in the transfer portal was a great play, I might add. You have Cash Jones coming back, and you have Oscar Delp even still being a part of this roster. They have weapons on the outside. But, I mean, I guess the key for them is really just to be ready when their number is called. And Branch would certainly apply that, as he would get a 36-yard touchdown, doing exactly what he does best. He's a speed guy. Georgia, knowing this to be the case, decided to get the man out in space on multiple occasions, with that play being no different. I mean, you literally call an RPO for him. It's a little bit of a bubble screen, and he's got enough space to run right through the blocks and get all the way past every single one of the defenders, because he's got that advantage over most guys. So that would bring it to a 21-14 score. Now, a lot of the drives here would result in punts for both squads. But Georgia, again, trying to at least make some progress, would manage to get back on the board with a field goal of their own. Ballins would help them get there with a few runs of his own. Frazier would also try to get them deeper into the red zone. But once that happened, Herring and a lot of the other Tennessee defenders got right up in Gunnar Stockton's grill because, again, of course, they are going to try to utilize his legs in those situations rather than rely on him to pass. It would be a 21-17 game from there. Then we get unexplainable interceptions from both teams here. I don't really know what to make of either one of these. Aguilar, after Aguero, ended up hit-sticking the hell out of one offensive player earlier in the ball game, he decided to put his coverage skills to use and get a good look on Aguilar. At the same time, though, it was a bit of an underthrown pass. I don't really know why he decided to throw it in this direction. And Aguero absolutely capitalized on the play. But Georgia would also follow that up with an interception of their own. Most revealing about this, though, is the fact that Gunnar Stockton was not in for this Hail Mary attempt. In fact, coming into this game to start out this season, in terms of passes that were 20 or more air yards down the field, Gunnar Stockton hadn't completed a single one in this season. Let that sink in. They must not have trusted his arm in that situation. And so they had in a backup quarterback here who I guess had a stronger arm. Yet it still didn't really do much of anything for them. This would still result in an interception. So I guess it's more of a non-story. But either way, Tennessee had the advantage at the half. It wouldn't be long, though, before Georgia Tech would open the second quarter with a very, very loud response. Just doing what they do best, implementing the ground game, getting all of their running backs involved, getting Gunnar Stockton involved in, a bit of QB power situations every now and then. Just chipping away more yards after more yards. They literally only went for one pass on this drive. Everything else was a run. And still, Tennessee at this point could do nothing about it. They just had to take it. And Woodring would capitalize on this McCray touchdown to give Georgia a 24-21 lead. Ensuing 3-and-outs would follow for both teams yet again. And Aguilar, although, again, good passes were thrown by him throughout the course of the day, even to start out this drive, to Staley, I don't know exactly why he decided to throw it in this direction yet again. And Bolden, one of the D-backs for the Bulldogs, would make him pay for that instantly. It's really was an unexplainable one to watch. Truthfully. And for a player in Aguilar who had been playing so well, who had been mostly accurate to start off his tenure as a Volunteer, to see him making those erratic reads and just not being settled and composed in those situations was definitely a bit of a deviation from what he had been doing from the first couple weeks. But again, this is Georgia's defense compared to Syracuse. There's virtually nothing similar in that front about that team and their defense. So I get that. Also, East Tennessee State, yeah, you're that's not going to compare to Georgia's defense, to say the least. But as bad as that could have been, they got right in Tennessee's territory, but didn't really do a whole lot of moving. They were forced to kick a field goal, and it would be a 27-21 game, but not before Brazel II would go for a hat trick. Oh, man. In one of the better plays you'll see, Brazel II completely boxed out the corner guarding him here and just went up, mossed the shit out of him, and ran it straight into the end zone for a 56-yard touchdown. To have that many deep touchdowns and those insane catches, and you hadn't even reached the fourth quarter yet. So it was going to get interesting from there with Tennessee going in with a 28-27 lead. Once more, the Bulldogs would settle for a field goal, but the Vols would respond yet again immediately with Star Thomas getting in for a 27-yard run, and then also Aguilar having a great pass to Staley, in which, again, the entire defense was just caught off guard here because after a run like that, Volunteers hustled to the line of scrimmage with the intent to go full tempo. And they got their asses, with Staley being able to get in for a 32-yard touchdown. And it gave them a 5-point lead. It was looking even better for the Vols when they were able to force a fumble on Gunnar Stockton. But credit to the Georgia defense for forcing them to settle for a field goal. Now, intrigue and cinematic qualities were about to creep in for this game. Because although Stockton had struggled to stretch the ball down the field, he might have put together his finest drive of the game as an individual player, getting a good bullet pass over to White Helton for 17 yards, making sound reads time and time again. And then, when the time came for him, although he'd struggled all season to complete a pass more than 20 yards down the field, when they called on him to make the fucking throw to London Humphreys for a 28-yard touchdown, he did that. It was an absolute beauty. Had the fade route right over into the end zone to the right side. And Humphreys had the hands out. Stockton fired that shit all the way over to the right side of the field and deep enough to where only Humphreys could get it. And it looked like a fucking masterpiece. They're down by 2 points at this point. And from there, they get Zachariah Branch out in space again to tie up the ball game. This drive would be heavily important for the rest of the game for Tennessee. Because, to be honest, they started it as well as you could have. All you got to do, if you are Tennessee, is get a field goal to win the game. They know that, and they played like it. They were incorporating all of their different running backs down the stretch of this drive. And then Aguilar would hit Kitzelman for a 6-yard gain before Bishop would pick up a third down to take off even more time. And ensure that Georgia did not get the ball back before the end of this game. Now at that point, you're thinking, with Georgia wasting their timeouts, you'd think that the Volunteers would have just called a play to kick the field goal right there. But instead, they line up in a formation to legitimately take yet another stab at running the football. And then, in a brutal manner, Tennessee's offensive lineman gets a false start penalty. Right then and right there to push them back. Now, mind you, this is a kicker in Max Gilbert who had never been put in a scenario like this before. Although this was going to be a bit of an easier field goal, you know that he's going to have some nerves in this situation. And the fact that for whatever reason the Volunteers were much more worried about bringing this even closer rather than trying to get the job done and just flat out win the game, it ended up coming back to bite them in the most brutal of fashions. Because not only would they end up missing the field goal here from 43 yards out, but again, you would give Georgia the ball back, which they didn't end up doing anything with it, but now you're in overtime unnecessarily when all you had to do was just finish off the game right then and right there. You did not need to constantly drag it by trying to get closer and closer and closer into field goal range. You were already there. You just added even more pressure to the poor kid. And the Vols fans were letting him have it. They were booing him. And I'm like, I guess it's fair. You're going to be discontent in that situation. But it ain't his fault. It ain't his fault. If you just let him kick it right then and right there without thinking, without adding that extra pressure, he probably would have made the kick. And the Volunteer fans would be having a much different Saturday following the game. But instead, that didn't happen. They had to go in extra time with this team. And the Vols, unfortunately, would have to settle for a field goal. And from then on, even though people didn't want to admit it, I said right then and right there, that would probably be the game for Tennessee. Because all you need is 25 yards. Georgia's just going to keep running the ball, right? That's exactly what they did. 3 plays. 3 runs. Frazier would get them down inside the 5-yard line, and then McCray, in a matter of just 2 sequences, would finish them off to give Georgia the 44-41 win in overtime. Again, this is the thing with SEC teams. They're going to consistently beat up on each other throughout the course of their conference play. But again, the competition is highly respected around there. So I would imagine that if Tennessee can continue to maintain a solid level of production and results throughout the course of this season, I would believe that there's a chance they could still get in the CFP. But obviously something like this is going to hurt in the short term. And it should. You had it if you're them. You were winning, and you had a chance to capitalize on victory if you simply just go for the kick rather than just trying to play this as sweet as you were. This is not a situation that you could tread lightly in, and they chose to do exactly that. That was their demise here. But from an overall standpoint, this was a great ball game. And Georgia should be thrilled at the fact that Gunnar Stockton was able to deliver that pass down the stretch. But more importantly, the fact that they could have this kind of balanced attack here and manage to overcome these deficits and win against a tough Tennessee squad like this, you should be very much celebrating that right now. So when looking at the numbers, as for the Bulldogs, Stockton would have 304 passing yards and 2 touchdown passes, the touchdown run. Frazier would have 73 rushing yards on 14 carries, and Young would have 73 yards on 4 receptions. Branch would have 69 receiving yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown, and the aforementioned Humphreys would have a touchdown and 59 receiving yards on 2 carries. As for Tennessee, Aguilar would have 371 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, with Star Thomas also having 60 rushing yards on 9 attempts. And Brazel II, again, an absolute hell of a game on his end. By far the leading receiver for both squads in the game, with 6 catches for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns. Staley would also have 97 receiving yards and 9 catches for a touchdown. Definitely a barn burner, but it is one that Tennessee will run back. It makes things incredibly hard for them down the stretch. But if they can sustain excellence, they should be somewhat okay. You should question their defense, though. I mean, to get owned at the line of scrimmage like that consistently, even if you win this game, there should probably be cause for concern there. All right. Moving on to LSU in Florida. Man, Death Valley is real. Is real. I don't know what the hell it was with Florida in this game. But I'm going to say this. The way that LSU defense, through pressures with Harold Perkins Jr., through stop spot all of their different D-backs and Halsey in the lane, in Cooley, etc., the way that front seven managed to hold the line down for at least a good portion of time outside of a few runs from Baugh, nobody else did anything in that department. They completely rattled Florida as an offense. Completely. I mean that in every sense of the imagination. Own them. To the point where all LSU had to do was sustain. They had their own offensive struggles, don't get me wrong, but oh my goodness. Yo, like Florida, man, I just gotta talk about this right now. Like, honestly, this would be the best way for me to cover this game. And I'll get to LSU's more redeeming qualities in this one in a second. But I gotta start out with Florida. It's done. It's done. It is fucking done. It's I don't know how many times I can say that. It just is. For somebody. You can look at the athletic directors. You can look at this as a Napier thing. Fine. Because, to be honest, the fact that he does have a losing record against not only ranked competition, but also SEC competition in general since he's been there, it's obviously a bad look. And when this becomes a pattern of something always turning up against this kind of team, that should reflect poorly on Napier at this point. Fair. But at the same time, outside of a few solid improv plays, outside of a little bit of scrambling prowess, and outside of a few darts down the field, at least the ones that the LSU defense was able to give up, because again, coverage for them was exceptional. But DJ Lagway played absolutely horrible. There is no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it, man. Because for every one of those kinds of plays that I just mentioned, there were also errant reads repeatedly throughout this game that just made me scratch my fucking head. And a lot of those errant reads turned into turnover after turnover after turnover after turnover after turnover. As decent as this Florida defense played against LSU's very dynamic offense whenever they're on, who in their right mind in a college football game would be able to overcome 5 interceptions from their quarterback. Yes, you heard that right. 5 interceptions by DJ Lagway in this game. What in the absolute fuck? Holy shit. There's no reason why something like that should be going down. And everybody got a piece of it. I mentioned Cooley, he had one. I mentioned Halsey, he had one. Spears had multiple on him. And then Pickett also had an interception. To the point where even when they cap off the game with that, it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty fitting for what's gone down at this point. And that's not a great sign. Again, Lagway is still a younger quarterback. He's a sophomore at this point. I guess you can't expect it to all be there. And Death Valley is certainly a hostile environment, but damn. What? Absolutely unacceptable. And that just killed Florida in this game. The fact that every time they did force an ideal stop on LSU, it was followed by something absolutely laughable. And you do have to give LSU massive respect for that. One of these picks ended up turning into a fucking pick 6. And that would end up being the final score of the game, with Spears getting that one. For as much as we talk about SEC football being contested, you'll also have games like this that are just complete defensive stalemates. That's exactly how this game was. Nussmeier had his fair share of errant plays as well, but he kept the turnovers to a minimum, and when he needed to lead them on a touchdown drive, he did that early in the second quarter, getting a touchdown pass over to Thomas from 23 yards out. And that, honestly, as much as I'll criticize him, it was a beautiful throw. Now, granted, you expect Nussmeier to have that kind of advantage, right? He is at home, and he's far more experienced than DJ Lagway is. But that quality, even if it might be seen as passive football, at the end of the day, you can't say that he didn't do his job in this game. And even though it might not have been enough, when you can have your defense in tune like that, you're always going to have a chance to win any game, honestly. No matter what team you are, no matter what conference you play in, if your defense is that fucking reliable, drive in, drive out, you have the full-fledged advantage over any team that you're facing off against. And that ended up being the case here. Like, all the criticism would be due for Lagway, definitely. But LSU has to go out there and force him into a lot of these different situations. They got completely in that brother's head by the end of this game. Completely. They live in his head rent-free now. And adding even more insult to injury, both teams were talking shit to each other. Granted, it was a hotly contested game last season, so I get that. But the LSU squad would definitely get the last laugh. Then Florida linemen have the nerve to try to fight some of these fucking people at the end of the game. And in all honesty, as I was saying in the moment, if I am the defense, I would be fucking frustrated at the fact that, for the most part, outside of one offensive touchdown and a few field goals, you did your job well if you are Florida. I think that's something you can take away from this as a positive for them. They played LSU well. for them to be a number 3 team and struggle like this against an SEC squad that is considered to be far worse at this point, and to a team that obviously lost to South Florida last week. Like, they put the offense in pretty good spots repeatedly. Like, Florida was obviously getting railroaded out there, but they kept getting chances. They kept trying to bottom Tom. And yet, the fact that you literally have DJ Lagway throw a fucking pick six on a drive that could have very much resulted in an LSU lead is just absolutely fucking tragic. You did their part. Offense did not answer the call. You should feel that. But I don't think the offense can say the same thing. And especially when it comes to the running. I mean, Baugh definitely made some plays throughout this game. They had this man get 105 total yards on 17 total touches. But outside of that, where was everyone else when it came to rushing the ball? I just was questioning that the entire time. Made no sense to me. So, Florida, in this case, this is just going to be another underwhelming season for them. Simply put. Like, I don't know if I can say that this is rock bottom for them as a team, but at least for Lagway, maybe. And if I'm him next week, honestly, you just got to tone it down. Because you've got to play so much better. Come out, just try to carve up the defense as best as you can. Because if he keeps on trying to go for all these big plays like this, and honestly, maybe there are some cases in which he should, there's definitely a higher chance that he'll be susceptible to turnovers. There's also another component to that in that, man, his confidence is going to be absolutely shot. I don't know a world in which a quarterback will turn around and have a masterclass game in college football after throwing for 5 interceptions in a single game. It's difficult for any quarterback to bounce back from a performance that atrocious, let alone a sophomore quarterback in college at this point. And sticking with the theme of the SEC constantly trying to beat up on each other. Think about this. Not only is most of their remaining competition SEC teams, but 7 of their next 9 opponents to finish out the season are not just ranked, but also all in the top 15. Every single one of them. Miami is obviously an ACC school. They're 4. Texas is 8. Texas A&M is 10. Georgia is 5. Ole Miss is 13. Tennessee is 15. And then Florida State, to cap off the fucking season, the way they're playing right now, have risen to 7 after a bye week. Plus, it could be even worse. Mississippi State, the way that they have been playing, could also emerge as a top 25 team at some point within the next few weeks. So we are talking about potentially 8 of their remaining 9 opponents being ranked competition at this point in the season. And those are the guys that Florida will have to try to bounce back against throughout this season. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They had to win these softball games. And they only handled one of those such games. Like, it is legitimately a wrap for them. When I say that repeatedly, I mean that. There is just no coming back from that. And again, I don't really know what this does for Napier's job. There's a lot more that goes into it, and everybody wants to blame him to be the scapegoat, I guess. It's like, again, there's so much more that goes into it. It'd be easy to do that. And again, it's not the greatest reflection on him that you are consistently losing games like this. But this was just a night of absolute atrocity from DJ. It's just that simple. No coach, no X's and O's, no other statistical contribution can overcome something like that. When you are overturning the ball that consistently as a single player, let alone a team, you are constantly being detrimental to yourself. Constantly. There is no way. And as for LSU, again, obviously, they're going to have to face a lot more SEC competition as well, too. So, naturally, they're probably going to start experiencing a little bit of slotting as well. But at the very least, they've bought themselves a cushion to at least hold on to for a little while. It might become irrelevant as the season goes on, but for them to be 3-0 right now is valuable as they head into mostly conference play. They've understood that. And, for a team that has constantly struggled to start their seasons off on the right foot, the fact that they've done that now, that is a well-appreciated change for them. But, of course, I saw something that still is pretty hilarious because I guess in a presser, like Brian Kelly was asked about issues with the offense or something like that, and then he just decided to go ballistic on these niggas. It was only a matter of time before he was somehow, some way gonna get angry at somebody for something. It never fails. Like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, of course this nigga did this. It's not surprising. And on all honesty, I mean, like, yeah, you probably would want to have a lot more, like, faith and penchant to defend your team in that situation. So I guess you can't wholly blame Brian Kelly for that. I mean, like, how about giving credit to their defense and respecting the players there for getting the job done and doing what they did to DJ Lagway? Why do you feel so compelled to spin this as a negative offensive game and try to find flaws in what they ended up doing? Because at the end of the day, they ended up being victorious anyways. So from that standpoint, it's like, okay, could be a little reasonable, but it's Brian Kelly in a nutshell, to say the least. Okay, all right. Moving on to number 16, Texas A&M versus number 8, Notre Dame. This one would start off very interestingly. Reed would instantly try to target his wide receivers deep, and that would be constant throughout the night for good reason. But at least on this play right here, safety help was there. It was very fucking close to being pass interference, but Concepcion was tightly guarded by both of those guys, and it ended up being an incompletion. Huge for them. What would become even greater for them to start out this game in Notre Dame is that they would manage to get a block kick, and the person who blocked it would have it tip up. As a person tried to recover it, he also tipped it back to the ensuing man in Johnson, who would then return it for a touchdown to give the Fighting Irish a 7-0 lead without them even having to touch the field on offense. And then both teams would go 3 and out back to back. But Texas A&M, once they got the ball back, they would respond immediately. Keep Micah Craver in your minds. He would certainly do that to the Fighting Irish defense. They couldn't guard him, especially in this first half. Not only would he get an 86-yard touchdown here, but he would quite literally, by the end of this first half, have the most receiving yards in one for Texas A&M since Evans in 2013. Mike Evans, that would be. And anytime you're going to be in the same ball club as Texas A&M Mike Evans, you know you're doing something exceptionally well. You also know at this point, at least if you are the defense in this situation, you should understand that the dude is a threat. I get that KC Concepcion is one of the best wide receivers in the nation, and don't worry, he would get his too throughout the night. But my goodness, you couldn't get a handle on this kid after that play immediately? He kept on torching him after this. This was not the greatest showing from this Notre Dame coverage unit, I will say. And also, although Reed was forced into a lot of pressure and had a terrible game in terms of accuracy, the fact that on these kinds of plays, he had enough time to make these deep reads and fucking inflate his yards per completion throughout the night. Man, when you hear that, that's going to be fucking insane. But anyways, I mean, Notre Dame would respond immediately. They would try to get Jeremiah Love involved early and often, because they certainly did not in the last game, which was pretty surprising. But they would fall into a little bit of a weird situation. Jeremiah Love is such a formidable guy that I guess the defenders can't get enough of him and they want to just keep touching him. That's exactly what this Ricks person would do. Just an absolute idiot, because you stop him for no gain and then you just tackle him on the bench to help them extend their drive. Right after that, for him just being an absolute idiot, he would get a taste of his own medicine, because Eli Raridan would get a 43-yard gain. And again, in a similar way to the catch he had against Miami, not really that fast of a tight end, so he would naturally be caught, but they were deep enough in range to get down to the 5-yard line. And while they would be deterred back, Jadarian Price, their backup running back and complimentary piece to Jeremiah Love, would actually get in for a 7-yard rushing touchdown. Things would become even better for the Irish, again, as soon as they started to implement a little bit of pressure on Marcel Reed, because his inconsistency and inaccuracy issues have been well documented. And that would happen when Leonard Moore, one of their better cover corners on the team, would manage to get an interception on him to give the Fighting Irish the ball back. But they would merely settle for a field goal in this situation, even with Jadarian Price picking up a 24-yard gain on third down. Jeez. A&M would not be done in the slightest, because then it would be the Le'Veon Moss and KC Concepcion show. How do you manage to get Concepcion burning multiple cornerbacks on back-to-back plays for gains of 16 and then 45 big yards before Moss punched it in for a 1-yard touchdown? That's just unacceptable work. Like, the offense is honestly answering the call, and now it's the defense just struggling to force pressure and struggling to stick with the receivers on the outside. But again, granted, as elitist Concepcion is, you knew that was going to be a task. So why exactly are you backed up on them? Why are you allowing them to get open in space and make the moves they need to make to pick up even more yardage after the catch? Like, they were not really playing a whole lot of man at the right times. Because if you were, situations like that would not be so easy for those wide receivers. And then Notre Dame as well, they kept firing for the most part. I mean, Jeremiah Love would get in for a 36-yard touchdown on a pretty well-timed wheel route by him. It was a great play design, and it was so good that one of the wide receivers that was actually supposed to, one of the linebackers rather, that was actually supposed to guard Jeremiah Love out of the backfield got completely frozen up. Literally just standing there like a bot looking at the quarterback. He didn't even recognize that Jeremiah Love had multiple yards on him, and he ran in virtually unscathed for a touchdown to the right side. Now, that worked so well for the Fighting Irish, but how is it that after Craver managed to torch them again on a third down, why would they allow the backup running back in Owens to essentially do the same thing to them out of the backfield to the left side of the field to help Texas A&M get within Notre Dame's 5-yard line? Like, this play worked for you, and yet somehow, some way, the defense doesn't pick up on the fact that you called the same exact play to the other side of the field. And he nearly got in the end zone. But, of course, Moss would get another touchdown for himself. You get a really unexplainable sequence from C.J. Carr here. Again, obviously, he is a redshirt freshman. And, I did criticize them for at least putting a little too much pressure on C.J. Carr. You don't need him to be Superman for your squad right now. But you want to provide him with as much help as he can possibly get to put him in the best positions to maximize his talent. Right now, at least. You don't need him consistently trying to push the envelope and go far beyond what he can give you right now. And while he would get a solid pass to my namesake, he would have a not-so-nice pass attempted to Price. Because for as solid as Price can be as an all-around back, he is not a tall guy. So the fact that C.J. Carr went on to, loft this pass up, it got tipped up by Price as he tried to go for it, and it landed into the hands of the same linebacker in Williams that got dazed and confused by C.J. Carr on an earlier touchdown drive, right? That's just highly unfortunate. That's not a decision that you can make, but it would pay off immediately for Texas A&M. They wouldn't mind. I mean, they just ran the ball immediately after getting Craver on another 31-yard gain with him running so free across the middle of the field and just making all of these extra moves to break tackles and force misses. Moss would get in for another touchdown yet again, and then the end of the half would be somewhat uneventful. I mean, yeah, Notre Dame would fumble on fourth down to have a turnover on downs, but Texas A&M would miss a field goal. So this really didn't end up costing them all that much, but it just added even more salt to the wound, man. Notre Dame has had the lead, but a few mistakes, just a few stupid decisions, now have them down by 4 heading into the second half. So something had to give at some point. And granted, it did. While my namesake would get in a 27-yard gain, it would eventually not do all that much because they would be forced behind the line of scrimmage and then eventually punt. However, Texas A&M was pinned back so deep, and the pressure that they implemented here actually worked to perfection, overshooting both Concepcion and Craver on back-to-back pass attempts by Reed. And all of a sudden, in very great field position after this phase-on punt from 29 yards out, Notre Dame had a chance to respond. And they would immediately do it, as Jadarian Price would get in for another 17-yard rushing touchdown to give them a 3-point lead. The rest of the third quarter would see them both have punts and also the Irish turn the ball over on downs. It was weird because they had Jeremiah Love for at least like the third time by this specific play in this game run a weird wildcat to the heavy side of the formation. They stacked the box to the point where a lot of good pressure was going to come in from that side and naturally converge over there. And Jeremiah Love, in this case, like some of the others, ran right into that sea of Texas A&M defenders and got tackled for a loss to give the Aggies the ball back, with which, after a couple of plays from Concepcion, yet again, they would respond with a field goal. And then to open up the fourth quarter, with Greathouse getting the very first catch, and I think still the only catch in this ballgame for 34 yards, the Fighting Irish would manage to respond with a field goal of their own, but the defense was still not impervious to bending just a little bit, because now they had other receivers like Bussey getting involved. They also had Moss picking up a 12-yard rushing play on 3rd and 12. And it's like, that's not something that should ever really happen, right? But on 3rd down, they would be stopped, and the Fighting Irish would force Texas A&M to kick a field goal here yet again. At the very least, you will take that, I suppose. Oh boy. We have a chaotic 3-possession window here. Just absolutely chaotic. I mean, Notre Dame football did exactly what they needed to do for the most part. They ran 6 minutes off the clock, 12 plays, a few timely passes, but mostly run after demoralizing run, okay? Carr had a great pass to Raritan to start out this drive, and then they just kept spamming after they got the ball. My namesake again, they would spam the ball to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Even Will Pauling, the transfer from Wisconsin, managed to get a catch in. And you know what? Was that who that was the whole time? Because I think there was a player with the number 2 out there. That might have honestly been Will Pauling. Ain't that some shit? Forgot that he fucking transferred to Notre Dame. Like, I didn't hear anything about this whatsoever. That's a surprise. Okay, yeah, it is Will Pauling. All right, good side note to add in there. Interesting. But anyways, it was mostly the Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price show, with Jeremiah Love finally being able to go in for a touchdown to give the Fighting Irish a 41-34 lead in theory. Okay? They would actually fail a 2-point conversion here, because the holder in Tyler Buckner managed to fumble the snap on what would have been a routine PAT. And it didn't come even remotely close to being converted. The Fighting Irish defense had to have the stop of their lifetimes. And the Aggies had to put forth a valiant effort to go down and win the game. It's all going to come down to this, simply put. And it was looking like they could have avoided all that completely, because no bullshit, on the ensuing kickoff, the Aggies would go right down and get a fucking kickoff return for a touchdown from Bussey. And if that would have stood, oh my goodness, South Bend would have been in absolute shock and horror. And to be honest, they were. But there was a penalty because Melon Erstrom, their backup tight end, I believe, held and tackled one of the Gunners to the ground before Bussey even managed to break through and get this touchdown. So it got called back. Texas A&M would start back on the 26th, and even more madness would ensue. Anyways, because although he had been quiet for a little bit of time in this game, when they needed to, Craver broke free for yet another fucking catch for 34 yards, making the job easier for Marcel Reed in this situation. And then from there, 2-minute warning ensues, and although Notre Dame is trying to keep everything in front of them, at the same time, Texas A&M is strategically trying to make sure that they hold the last possession of the game. A lot of these next few plays are really just them taking advantage of what the defense is giving them in going for the short passes, going for the short rushing gains. They were not hard-pressed to score so quickly. With this Daniels run, they would get inside the Notre Dame 10-yard line. And this is where things truly hit ahead. This is going to be a fucking doozy. It's going to be an absolute doozy. You know it's going to get loud down there in Fighting Irish territory. So naturally, the linemen are feeling it as Nabo and Bisons, a couple of their linemen, would get back-to-back false start penalties. They send the pressure on the ensuing 2nd and 16, and Marcel Reed completely throws it all the way out of bounds with no chance for his receiver to get it. You get to 3rd and 16, and it's an incomplete pass. You think that Notre Dame's got a 4th down in the bag? No, they don't, because Christian Gray, their best cover corner, on a night in which he'd already been playing terrible as it was, managed to get called for defensive holding here. Although, granted, a lot of madness would be ensued when it comes to the refs. I'm not going to lie to you. Because at the same time that Christian Gray was being called for this, there were also multiple penalties that were being missed on the offensive line. And similar stuff would happen in the plays to follow. Yet, no flags are thrown there. So at the very least, what could have been offsetting penalties turned into yet another fresh opportunity for Texas A&M. Tough. But you still have to play the game. There's nothing you can do about that. They would get a good start, though, because Marcel Reed would try to carry it over to the right side of the field. They hawked it down completely. You get to 2nd down. Overshoots Concepcion again. 3rd down. Merlin Orstrom does not haul it in. And then you get into a 4th and goal from the 11-yard line for the game. Okay, play completely breaks down. Marcel Reed is trying to buy as much time as he can to get a touchdown, because at that point, you have no fucking choice. You have to score, or that is the game. He throws it all the way over to the left side of the field with Boerkircher, their tight end, in prime position to catch the ball, boxing out number 34, one of Notre Dame's linebackers, who honestly had been a heat-seeking missile all night long. Credit to him, he was fucking thumping everybody on this fucking Texas A&M offense. But when it came to getting out in coverage, Boerkircher had the absolute advantage over him. He stood no chance. He was far out of position of the ball. And as it's getting closer and closer and closer to Boerkircher, he rises up, having to catch it at an angle. He goes out and he gets it. And Texas A&M ties up the game. Pretty wild sequence. All they're waiting on now is for him to make the PAT, and they do that, taking a 41-40 lead with just 13 seconds left in the game. All of that madness. All of the self-inflicted wounds for Notre Dame, too. They had the stop in the bag, and yet time and time again, when it came down to the little details, they did not do what they were supposed to do. By that point, that would essentially be the game. I mean, there would be an ill-fated attempt at laterals, but it was just too far gone at that point. And Texas A&M would get the 41-40 win, upsetting Notre Dame in South Bend and forcing them to go 0-2. Again, Texas A&M, same way. Same way that a lot of the other SEC schools have carried themselves. You want to take as much advantage of these first 3 games in the season as you can, especially with the fact that now next season, they're going to be making sure that 9 conference games are being played when it comes to SEC competition. Making that ever more important. It, again, gives you somewhat of a cushion to where if you can manage to do well enough, you're going to be fine. As for Notre Dame, man, oh boy. Their chances look a lot slimmer. A lot slimmer. I mean, a lot of their schedule could be a little bit similar to last season, because I know they played Navy last season. So it's like, okay, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, their competition is definitely questionable to say the least. You go back-to-back losses to open up the season. Yes, to ranked competition, it's definitely hard to do. But think about this. I just checked this thing out, and not only is Notre Dame already at 0-2 to start out this season, they have now dropped all the way down to number 24 in the nation after this loss. You've got a tough hill to climb back up from if you want to be a CFP contender this season. And then, not to mention, you also have to overcome whatever bullshit criteria the committee might try to implement. Because, again, you never really know what will go into their decision-making on a year-to-year basis. It is always changing. So who's to say that they're feeling like Notre Dame will, by the end of the season, put together a good enough resume to stack up against other teams who might be vying for a CFP spot? We really don't know at this point. It's just hard to argue that. And that's why taking care of those 2 games were important. But in heartbreaking fashion, by 4 combined points. Their momentum completely swings just like that. That's tough. And again, it is so fucking crazy that you lost this game, because when you can do this to a quarterback, if they would have done it more consistently and not given up the big play, this would be absolutely insane. But the fact that you let, to get into Texas A&M's numbers, Marcel Reed, let's talk about him. Again, for as much as I give him shit about inaccuracy and inconsistency, he fucking lit this defense up. With big play after big play after chunk play after demoralizing chunk play. 17 of 37 passing, 45.9% completion from the field, in 360 passing yards, with 2 touchdown passes and an interception. What the hell? Like, that is quite literally somewhere around 21 yards per completion in damn near 10 yards per attempt. In one of the more inaccurate fashions imaginable. And they still go out and win this game late. You cannot possibly explain something like that going down. You also can't explain Craver going for 207 yards on 7 catches. While Concepcion had 4 catches for 82 yards himself. Credit to Craver. Like, this is not a person that I was that familiar with coming into this game, but, this is certainly a marquee performance from him. I don't think they really have any odds going for the Bolitnikov Award or anything like that at this moment. But you put together a pretty good case for yourself if you're going to pop off for a performance like that. Though again, I would think that after watching film, especially as they go up against tougher competition, I would imagine that they would try to do a much better job of game planning for the nigga. So I don't know if this exactly can be replicated, but we will see. As for Notre Dame, Carr went for 62.5% completion from the field, 293 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Jeremiah Love had 94 yards rushing and 53 yards in the passing game with 2 total touchdowns. Jadarian Price also had 2 rushing touchdowns on 68 yards. And Eli Reardon had 85 yards on 4 receptions, while Malachi Fields had 77 receiving yards on 5 receptions. Again, definitely a great game from a neutral perspective, but oh man, if you're a Texas A&M guy, you already know what time it would probably be in College Station after having a victory like that in the late night, and Notre Dame fans certainly went out sad in this one. There's no question about it. Like, to lose in that fashion with those fans watching at home, that's gotta suck. It just does. There's no other way to put it, man. It sucks, bro. All right, and moving on to Cal in Minnesota. Yes, I'm going to talk about this game. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of fucking SEC action, which is pretty crazy to say the least. But again, that's how the game shaped up this week. Those actually turned out to be some pretty good ones. Yet, this Cal-Minnesota game for the late time slot was actually pretty interesting. Obviously, with a lot of the other games finishing up at this point, they had to cut into some of the early action. But by the time I did get to actually watch it live, you have Jaron-Keawe Sagapolutele just throwing bombs out here to De Jesus and the like. What's new for him? Now, again, mind you, this man is a true freshman. Having Cal not only start off with a 2-0 record, but before they even got this touchdown, they were 9-9 in the red zone to open up the season. I don't know how that's possible. Honestly, this is California football we're talking about, man. Like, man, it's like they've obviously had star talent back in the day, but ever since the 2010s have taken off. We're talking about post Aaron Rodgers. We're talking about post Marshawn Lynch. We're talking about post Deshaun Jackson. When has California ever really been this good? So when you have people asking how the fuck they are 2-0 right now, It is truly hard to answer that question. It is a surprise. And I don't know how many wins they would even need in a row to ever become ranked again. But, although Sagapolutele is definitely susceptible to a few mistakes, definitely has his fair share of them in this game. After that hot start, he certainly cooled down a little bit in terms of accuracy and started to get unsettled a little bit. You have to give credit to the Minnesota defense for that. It was like even routine checkdowns just became hard misses for him. And, that will definitely flare up sometimes when you are a freshman quarterback. But when they got this fourth down stop right here, Minnesota and their quarterback and Drake Lindsey would also take advantage of that. He and Brockington, this Brockington guy, they just seemed to have good chemistry from my estimation. There were multiple tight window throws that Brockington just hauled in, seemingly with ease. And it's like, those are difficult plays you have to make time and time again. Did it without much effort, honestly. Eventually, they started to just chip away with a few runs, and then Cam Davis, their running back, would punch it in for a touchdown to tie up the ball game before Cal would close out the second quarter after Sagapolutele threw multiple bombs, not only to Hamper for 29 yards, but also to Jesus again for 19 to pick up not only a first down, but also get them deeper into Minnesota territory for their kicker to get a field goal and give them a 10-7 lead heading into the third quarter. For a while, California spent this third quarter losing yardage. Even with them being able to force an interception on Lindsey, they lost yardage in this stretch. They couldn't move the ball for anything. You've got to, that front seven for Minnesota was absolutely killer. And it ended up paying off for them as they were just able to run their way down for a touchdown. Obviously, another 23-yard completion to Brockington was mixed into all of this. But when, again, ball control is the name of the game. And when you can consistently do that to a team, it's going to start wearing them down. It felt like for a second that's exactly what could happen. The fact that they burned 5 minutes on this drive and managed to get in with Lindsey throwing a pretty beautiful pass to Gears. Like a little flat route going. And, Gears kind of runs up near the left side of the end zone. Linebacker is perfectly trailing this guy with his back completely turned. He can't locate the ball, and Lindsey just floats it right over his head. That's a pretty damn good ball for a 3-yard route. And they managed to tie the ball game there. Give Minnesota a 14-10 lead. California, though, would finally respond because they started getting their rushing attack going. Back-to-back 13-yard and 18-yard runs by Hyde Jr. would actually mark some of their longest runs of the night. And they would just keep that tempo going, as De Jesus would also get multiple catches from Sagapolutele on this drive, en route to a tight end by the name of Minnie getting in for a 9-yard touchdown catch, and then taking the lead here. Minnesota still had a chance to respond after, again, just taking a little more work to get down the field. Brockington, yet again, seems to be a reliable target for Lindsey, and who knows, maybe he could emerge as a solid wide receiver when it comes to looking at others in the nation. They would also continue to run the ball down the field with Ojibwe before Davis got stopped on third down, and then their kicker was forced to kick a 51-yard field goal. He would miss it. Extremely horribly. It wasn't even close, bro. And Cal would get the ball back. But again, Minnesota's tough defensive play would pay off for them as they would force to stop. However, all it takes in a one-score game like this is one mistake. Just one. And it just changes the complexion of an entire game. What would happen to Minnesota when you look at it is just absolutely insane. Because their Connor and Parrish would muff the damn kick. And it spotted the Golden Bears in an 8-yard possession. Talk about playing the field position game. That's going to be your easiest drive of the night. And although it did take them 3 plays, they got into the third down, but they did make the most of it. They call a play action pass on this play, and it manages to fool pretty much everybody. King is just wide open in the end zone. Sagapolutele doesn't even have to put that much effort into throwing it. It's just a practice route at that point. And they make the routine catch to go up 24-14 at this point. With Minnesota turning it over on downs, California would get the ball back, run down the clock a little bit, and kick a field goal to go up 27-14, which would represent the final score of the ball game. For the numbers, Sagapolutele delivers another, again, in totality, good game. And to think that there is still room for him to improve is absolutely insane. Everybody wants to keep on getting bailed out by just saying the abbreviation of his name. You have to put respect on his full fucking name. Don't keep on talking about no damn JKS. No, Jaron-Keawe Sagapolutele went 24 of 38 from the field and had 279 passing yards with 3 touchdowns through the air. Grizel had 60 receiving yards on 4 catches, and De Jesus had 54 yards, 7 catches, and a touchdown. As for Drake Lindsay, who also comes into this as a solid quarterback, had a bit of a slower game, 59.4% completion from the field and 205 passing yards with a touchdown and an interception. As for their rushing attack, they had 130 yards combined, but again, 3.5 yards per carry is not necessarily palatable. And again, in some cases, for some teams, it doesn't need to be. I would think that Minnesota, with the way their personnel is constructed, you probably want to be a lot more efficient than that if you're going to run the ball with that kind of volume. Well, that's just me. Brockington, again, by far, the best performing receiver of the night for either side. 8 receptions and 106 yards for him. Interesting, because this would literally be a fucking Big Ten in Pac-12 ball game just a few years ago. And to think that wouldn't even be the case anymore because California is in the fucking ACC is wild. But hey, I guess there's your dose of late night Saturday college football. That'll do it for this one though. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.